on to integrated question 6. And again, you will listen to an excerpt from a lecture on an academic topic. Just like we previously stated for question 4, the topics can be drawn from a variety of fields: life science, social science, physical sciences, and humanities. Each excerpt is between 60 and 90 seconds. And the lecture will contain illustrative examples that help explain or clarify the main concept or issue. You can practice using a textbook. Look at the end of the chapter and practice answering the end of unit questions orally. This has been very helpful for some previous students. Now, I want you to listen to this lecture about U.S. history. Don't forget to take notes if you need to.
Because the United States is such a large country, it took time for a common national culture to emerge. 100 years ago, there was very little communication among the different regions of the United States. One result of this lack of communication was that people around the United States had very little in common with one another. People in different parts of the country spoke differently, dressed differently, and behaved differently. But connections among Americans begin to increase thanks to two technological innovations: the automobile and the radio. Automobiles began to be mass-produced in the 1920s, which meant they became less expensive and more widely available. Americans in small towns and rural communities now had the ability to travel with ease to nearby cities. They could even take vacations to other parts of the country. The increased mobility provided by automobiles changed people's attitudes and created links that had not existed before. For example, people in small towns began to adopt behaviors, clothes, and speech that were popular in big cities or in other parts of the country. As more Americans were purchasing cars, radio ownership was also increasing dramatically. Americans in different regions of the country began listening to the same popular radio programs and musical artists. People repeated things they heard on the radio. Some phrases and speech patterns heard in songs and radio programs began to be used by people all over the United States. People also listened to news reports on the radio. They heard the same news throughout the country. Whereas newspapers tended to be local, radio brought Americans together by offering them shared experiences and information about events around the country.
When the lecture is over, you will see the question, which requires you to summarize. Read the question. Again, notice that you only have 20 seconds to prepare. Number 6 says, using points and examples from the talk, explain how the automobile and the radio contributed to a common culture in the United States. Here are some ideas about what you could include in your answer. You might begin with a little background and mention that the United States did not have a common culture 100 years ago because people in different regions of the country did not communicate with each other. Then you could say that the automobile and the radio changed the situation, and go on to summarize the information in the lecture that explains how. For example, you could say that when automobiles became inexpensive, people from small towns could easily travel to big cities or other parts of the country, and that when they began to do this, they started acting like other people from those regions, and they started to dress and speak in similar ways. As for the role that the radio played in the emergence of a national culture, you could point out that when the radio became popular, people from different parts of the country began listening to the same programs and the same news reports, and they began to speak alike and have similar experiences and ideas. If you have time, you could conclude by saying that these similar ways of speaking and dressing and thinking became the national culture of the U.S. today. Remember, you don't need to repeat every detail, but it is good to summarize the most important things. So now you've had an in-depth explanation of the TOEFL iBT speaking section. You are ready for more self-practice. But before you start, you should check out the PDFs labeled Strategies for Preparing for the Speaking section and Frequently Asked Questions about the TOEFL Speaking section. These will help you to complete the practice sets and the reflection questions in your materials. So thank you for listening and good luck! See you next time!